Welcome to another chapter of In the Keep podcast. I'm your very own prophet of the drowned god, the Motherlode. This show is all about the world of first-person shooters, their legacies, their lineage, and the people who keep that world turning. It is the will of the drowned god Cathala that our communities band together to frag and jib one another into oblivion for all eternity. Hello everybody out there, I hope you are taking good care of yourself and good care of your loved ones. If you have anybody out there in your life who perhaps you haven't spoken to in a long time, maybe they're older folks who don't get out much or, are just generally socially isolated in general, I think now might be the time to, make that phone call, let them know that you care. Just a suggestion, but let's not dwell on all that stuff for the next hour. Let's just kind of take this time to relax a little, forget about that, just think about what we're going to talk about here, which is this amazing interview with the CEO of Nightdive Studios. His name is Stephen Kick. I am a huge, huge fan of his. I'm very honored to have had this conversation, like on a personal level. That's just how big of a fan I am. But I also want to, say thank you to everybody who made this happen. So specifically, I want to say thank you to Brand Flakes. I want to say thank you to Frederick Schreiber of 3D Realms for, being really awesome people and just being amazing. They know who they are, they know what they did, and I can't thank them enough. But yeah, Steven is so much cooler than I could have possibly imagined. Like he's been on a journey. Like his life has just been something, where it's like someone to look up to, someone who takes chances and does things that are just kind of out of the norm, and arrived in his particular niche now in a really unique way. And I'm really glad to have had him come kind of tell that story to us. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. And before we get into it, just on a side note, I have now played the medical demo for Sytem Shock, and holy shit. That's all I'm going to say. Music that you are about to hear is from the original soundtrack of Sin. Be sure to pick up a copy of Sin Gold by Nightdive Studios. This is Zak Belica's absolutely outstanding soundtrack for the game. I believe he is now the director of audio over at Epic, if that says anything. So, without any further ado, let's get in the keep with Stephen Kick.
My name is Stephen Kick. I'm the CEO of Nightdive Studios. And man, how I got to this point, it's a long story. Where do I even begin? Went to art school to get a degree in computer game art and design. Graduated with best portfolio, got a job pretty much right away in San Diego. Then got another job at Sony Online Entertainment and worked on some MMOs and a game called PlanetSide 2, you might have heard of. Then basically went on a trip across all of Mexico and Central America after getting kind of creatively burned out and discovering that I could no longer play one of my favorite games, which was Sytem Shock 2. And instead of, not doing anything about it, I looked into who owned the rights, why the game wasn't available anymore, and managed to secure the license to digitally distribute the game again. And once that became relatively successful, I decided to look into other games that could use the same kind of TLC to ensure that people could enjoy and play them again. So yeah, that's the short version.
I always love the I was burnt out, so I took a Vision Quest type situation, like Kill Pixel from Wrath, Aeon of Ruin, that guy. He did a similar thing where he's just like, I don't know. I'm just gonna leave home and start like completely fresh and go off for a while, and then come back after my journey and reassess everything about life. And then here he is now doing that.
The original plan was to do South America, but by the time we got to Panama, we realized that we weren't going to be able to get our car across what's known as the Darien Gap, which is basically just this really kind of treacherous portion of land between the two continents, or the two regions.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the reason that we wanted to travel to begin with was because my girlfriend at the time and I were just both kind of burned out. She was also a character artist at Sony, and once we had kind of achieved that lifelong goal of working on games and doing what we loved, we kind of discovered that it wasn't really for us. And so, being in our early 20s, it was kind of like, well, what do we do? While we travel, we should see the world. We should kind of make sure that we kind of submerge ourselves in other cultures and new places, and maybe we can find inspiration and creativity by kind of exposing ourselves to something new. And
do you speak Spanish?
We got relatively fluent about halfway through the trip, so maybe 6 months in. And it's been a number of years since then, and I've pretty much lost most of it. But there was this one moment where we had crossed the border back into Texas after being gone for 10 months. And I just immediately started speaking Spanish to the border guards. and they're like, yeah, we don't speak Spanish. I was like, well, that was weird. I haven't heard English in, in a really long time. So
it's so funny because now it's like a requirement for them to speak Spanish.
I'm sure. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it was really interesting when we did cross the border, because they took a look at our car and it looked like it had just been driven, 10,000 miles all the way through Mexico and Central America.
Yeah.
And they're like, where are you guys coming from? We've never seen this before. And so we kind of just told them the story, and they're like, wow, that's really cool. All right, so we're going to have to pull every single thing out of your car.
Yeah.
We're going to x-ray it 3-4 times. We're going to remove the door panels, and we're going to, basically gut your car to search it for drugs. And we're like, cool, well, you're not going to find anything. And we were there for 2 hours. But we were all just laughing, and they were asking all these questions because at the time, there was a lot of news about people being abducted by the cartels and all this. And it appeared to be kind of a dangerous place for, Americans to go. But we never experienced anything even remotely foreboding. Everybody was unbelievably kind and compassionate, very welcoming. And it was a trip of a lifetime.
So when you came back, did you feel recharged? Like, I'm ready to take this on, and then you just stumble upon the Sytem Shock thing?
Well, it actually happened while we were in Guatemala, of all places. We were staying at this hostel called El Retiro, and it was down in this kind of jungle part of the country where it was very inaccessible. It was hard to get down there. And it was on one dark and stormy night when I had pulled out my laptop and I was ready to play some classic games that I had loaded up. I was like, oh, this weather is perfect. I'm going to play Shock 2. And I couldn't get it to run. Couldn't, use any of the normal kind of quick fixes like setting compatibility modes or anything like that to get any further. And basically went to GOG.com expecting there to be a download for it. But instead I found that it was the number one requested game at the time. So it was the top of their wish list with 40,000 plus votes or something. And I just became really fascinated with the fact that, one of the greatest games of all time couldn't be played, even a legit version off, the CD. It just wouldn't run on anything newer than, Windows XP. And yeah, I just did research. I kind of followed this digital breadcrumb trail and discovered that the rights had gone to a company in the Midwest called Meadowbrook or Star Insurance Company, and the trademark had gone to Electronic Arts. And initially, I just reached out to their general counsel and, wasn't expecting anything back. But I said, hey, I understand that you guys have the rights to this, and what are you planning on doing with them? And it was like only a matter of a couple of days when they wrote back and said, hey, yeah, we have the rights. What do you want to do? Do you want to make System Shock 3? So, being in the middle of the jungle in Guatemala at the time, it wasn't really an option to do that. But I suggested, why don't we put the original 2 games back up on digital platforms so that, people can enjoy those again and maybe drum up interest in an eventual entry into the series or a third game. So yeah, they went with that, and I reached out to GOG.com and they thought I was full of shit. But we got the deal through, and the game did really, really well in its first couple of months, and it basically opened up the whole idea of kind of going into the back catalogs and finding what's there and revitalizing games that that people had forgotten.
Well, let's put a pin in System Shock for now, because I'm going to return to that. The first Nightdive game that I actually played was all in one. I got like a gift from a friend who's like, I think you'll really like this. And so all at one time, like same day, I got Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream paperback in the mail.
Oh,
and then the game showed up in my Steam library, and he's like, I just want to send you on this journey. And I went on it, and that was like my first experience with you guys at all. But that story in that game just kind of like fundamentally changed the way I thought about, I don't know, fiction in general, and just the artwork. It's so beautiful. And I've noticed you seem to, I don't want to compare you directly to H.R. Geiger, but have some interest in that style of artwork. And I've noticed you've done some modeling too. So can you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Yeah, I kind of grew up in a house where, my dad and I watched, Tales from the Crypt and Star Trek, Star Wars, horror movies. It was just kind of the atmosphere at home. Like my dad had the original, like those giant portfolio books of Giger's, Necronomicon 1 and 2. And growing up, they were kind of like forbidden, you can't look at these books. They're too graphic. It's too, too wild, too sexual. And of course, like as soon as my parents would leave the house, I would sneak into his room and basically just pour over H.R. Giger. So yeah, I'm very, very fond of Alien. Anything that's kind of biomech. I've got a full sleeve tattoo that's very much in the Giger style, but it's of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu. Right above my desk, I've got one of the original portfolio prints that Giger had made to essentially pitch the movie Alien to 20th Century Fox, and it's the space jockey.
Yeah.
And it's signed by him, and it's like probably one of my most cherished possessions. So
I'm wearing my Alien shirt right now, as a matter of fact, just to be in the mood for this.
Yeah, it's just, there's something about that art that just, it resonates with me, and it resonates with so many other people for so many different reasons. And it's just, it's really interesting that you bring up I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, because the same company, basically, they were the ones that did Darkseid, which was a adventure game based off of his artwork. And we were trying to get that game right after we had secured I Have No Mouth, I Must Scream. And I got to speak with Giger's agent a couple times, and we were very close to signing a deal. And about a week later, that's when he fell.
Oh, God.
And then passed away. And so, it was really tough for me just personally, because I was very close to, working with him as close as I possibly could at the time.
Yeah.
And then to have such a visionary pass away before his time was also very heartbreaking. And then, just a year or two ago, Harlan Ellison passed away as well.
Mhm.
And I was much closer with him. I had spoken with him on the phone a number of times about all kinds of topics. And he was just such a gentleman and so friendly. And more than anything, I think he was thrilled that people were getting to play his game again. It's been documented kind of thoroughly before, but when he was originally approached by Cyber Dreams, I think that's the name of the company. I'm like totally drawing a blank, but he was all for it. He wanted to do it, but he wanted to add a lot more to the game than there was initially written in the story. And so, he worked with the lead producer there and basically wrote far more than in terms of like just pure words than are in the book to design the game.
The game completely expands like way further than the book could have ever, as a short story. But that game is a journey. It really just takes you way deep in there when you go to the Nazi internment camp and you're in the jungle and all these amazing kind of just trips, man. Medieval castles, and none of that's in the book. It's just like such a deep dive. It's a Nightdive, quote unquote, into an amazing mind. Like I would want to sit here and I'll bother you some other time about this, but like the more I could know about him as a person would be amazing. That is just such a trip for you to go on, dude.
Yeah, it was. I'll never forget the first time he called me because it was totally unexpected. I was originally dealing with his agent in New York, who was, he's like, all right, well, I'm going to talk to Harlan and we'll see what he says. And, a couple hours later, my phone rings. I'm like, who? I don't recognize this number. And I answered the phone and I'm like, hello, Steven, this is Harlan Ellison. And then my blood just turned cold. I was like, oh my God. He was so friendly. Just a great guy.
Such a creative genius, man. Speaking of that, I also noticed you're a huge Tool fan, which their artwork also kind of speaks to that as well. And I think their music is kind of, in a lot of ways, the musical form of what I think H.R. Geiger's work would look like.
Yeah, there's definitely some influences that you can see in some of their music videos. I would say primarily, from about 1992 to 96, like those first three albums, definitely more so than the latest three. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of no coincidence that I would be, kind of fans of all those different things across all those different mediums. They all kind of play into the same themes and the darkness, the darkness of the recesses of the human mind and that type of thing. But yeah, I had actually just done some personal artwork. I'm not sure if you saw of the representations I did of each of the 6 Tool albums.
Yes, I did. I was literally looking at that over the past couple of days.
But yeah, so like a lot of that, I didn't directly reference anything. It was all kind of just out of my head at the time while I was listening to the music. But I mean, the influences are clearly there. I mean, you look at it and you're like, oh, this is Giegerish. It's got the coiling shapes and the repeating, markings and things, all the hallmarks of kind of his style.
So cool. So I recently drew some attention to myself because I think I referred to Fred Schreiber as the father of retro FPS.
Oh yeah.
and then so Dave responds to me and he's like, well, he's the father and I'm the arbiter. And then he called you the scuba instructor.
Yeah.
But what's your relationship with those guys? Let's take a little trip down that.
Our relationship is pretty new, at least with 3D Realms and Fred. He and I have just kind of gotten to know each other really well after we acquired the rights to Sin, because that's a game that's very close to their hearts. Dave Oshry and I go back to maybe 2012 or 2013, we met at E3 at a like a press event that was hosted by GOG, actually. And I was there in support of an indie game that I was doing the art for at the time. And I had already shipped System Shock through GOG, but they had no idea that I was there, which was really fun because, word kind of got around that I was the guy that did that. And then they eventually all came up to me and they were like, how the fuck did you do that? Like, we've been trying to get that game for years. Like, who, you must have family that works at the company or whatever, because there's no way, you could have gotten this. And so that was really fun. And Dave was there in support of Rise of the Triad, the Interceptor remake. And he and I just hit it off kind of famously, and we've been really good friends since then.
Yeah. It's just a really cool that you guys had this holy trifecta going on of like these awesome kind of retro-esque games, and each of you have your own kind of unique lane going on, where I feel like New Blood is just kind of crazy and pushing the boundary all the time, and then 3D Realms has it kind of like reflects each person's personality in a way. And what you're doing is, I mean, I can't say it enough, man. This is just bringing an entire wealth of all these amazing games that otherwise a lot of us wouldn't be able to play, especially younger guys like me. Like, I didn't even know about System Shock until after you, like your version was already the definitive version by the time I'd played the game. So that speaks volumes too. Then you go on and you form this company and you take on all of these projects. How do you manage all of that? What do you do? And I know you're like, the Mrs. is also involved.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah. So Alex, my wife, she basically handles all the finances. So she's our CFO. She makes sure that everybody gets paid. All of our taxes get done. She does the actual important work.
Yeah.
I was handling all that stuff at first, but it just got to be so time consuming because of all the various accounts that we had, and it was taking kind of days out of the week, and she just decided that she was going to handle it. But in terms of all the other projects, I mean, it seems very, very busy right now just with the amount of things that we have announced. Blade Runner, Shadow Man, Sin Gold coming out again, Doom 64 launching last Friday. And the fact of the matter is we've got kind of like all these things are staggered, and they're kind of, they're planned like months in advance, sometimes years in advance. And sometimes they all just kind of coincide at the same time, which is what we kind of had now. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and my job and Larry Cooperman, my partner and head of biz dev at Nightdive, we're actively securing the rights to stuff right now that we won't announce until maybe 6 months down the road, when we've already got a working build of that ready to go. So it's just we're just constantly churning through stuff, and the guys that develop the Kex engine and do the majority of the work are kind of the real stars of the show. They make it possible, and they just pretty much take everything that we throw at them. And it gets hectic and stressful sometimes because a lot of projects do sometimes overlap depending on the priority. But they always get it done, and the results kind of speak for themselves. I mean, we probably wouldn't be here talking to you if we weren't doing a good job. So
we'll never know what the alternative is, but the fact is that the reality is really fucking cool. And so it's like kind of a constant, from what I can tell from the outside, just securing different licenses. And then, so you're dealing with several different teams, in terms of like who's going to make the game, who's going to get the rights. Like I'd imagine you're dealing with a lot of different people all the time, lots of just wheeling and dealing and just in general communicating 24/7. I can't imagine there's a lot of breaks involved.
Yeah, there really isn't. And this came up in a recent conversation, mostly due to the coronavirus.
Yeah.
But, if anything, what I do and what we do at Nightdive hasn't slowed down at all as a result of that because, one, we're all remote. So all, 30 of us are kind of all over the world. And we're all in different time zones. So essentially, Nightdive is kind of working around the clock. There's like a 24-hour schedule almost. So like when I wake up, the guys in New Zealand or Australia are just getting up or they're going to bed or whatever. And so it's constant. It's constant communication with not only the team, but our licensors and the platforms and the publishers and you just never know, what you're going to get some days, which is kind of the fun of it.
It seems like it would be rewarding in a lot of ways to just, wake up in the morning and like, look at all this stuff that got done when I was asleep. But then there's also got to be like, oh my God, look at all these fires.
Sometimes.
Put out.
Yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'd be lying if I said that, we didn't have the same issues that every other game studio had. We get the same stuff. There's personality issues, there's conflicts, there's stress, there's deadlines, there's budgetary constraints, there's all that stuff. And the company is going to be 8 years old this November. So I think we've done a pretty good job of kind of scaling up to meet the demand of all the stuff that we got going on. And it's just every year we just get a little bit bigger and get to do bigger and badder things. I mean, if you had asked me last year if we were going to do Doom 64, I probably would have laughed. But here we are. We've worked on a Doom title. I feel like we've reached a major milestone.
Yeah, I mean, what was that kind of deal like? Did Bethesda reach out to you guys and say like, "Hey, we need the experts on porting old games to new consoles"?
I had reached out to id a couple years ago about it because Sam Kaiser, the lead engineer behind the Kex engine, had already done some kind of preliminary work on the EX version of Doom 64. And we were showing them that, and they thought it was really cool. But at that time, Doom Eternal was like just starting production. And so that was their primary focus, and they didn't really want to expend any additional resources into something like Doom 64. But then, not too long later, they're like, we want to do this with you guys. You've done amazing work on these other projects, and like this would just be such a badass pre-order incentive for Doom Eternal. So we just hopped right on it. We're like, all right, sounds good. And so, like I said, not only was this a milestone in terms of, IP kind of exposure, but it was also the first game that we more or less simultaneously released across all platforms. So PC, Xbox, Switch, PlayStation. We've never done that before with any of our titles, but it's always been our goal. And it was just really special to be able to do that with Doom 64.
There were several conversations that I had leading up to the release of Doom Eternal where I have a big hang up about pre-ordering games. Like it really bums me out to think that I might have just spent $60 and just get let down. But I justified it to several people being like, at the very least, I'll get some of my money's worth out of this Doom 60. Like I knew that was going to be epic because I knew who was working on it and I knew, what to expect game wise. I love the soundtrack. I'm just glad to see it finally, in the limelight where it should be, along with all the other Doom titles. So this is like very meaningful to a lot of people that you guys took on that project, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you. We always knew that the game was overlooked by a lot of people, including original Doom fans. Because at the time, when Midway had originally developed it, I don't think that there was like really clear messaging on what it was that they were doing. So, myself included, I always just assumed that it was a port of the original Doom, but on Nintendo 64. And so I never, looked into it. I never was compelled for any reason to try it out. And I mean, man, was I wrong? It's kind of like the perfect. It's like in an alternate universe, that would have been Doom 3, right? Um, very
Right.
similar but different art style. It builds up on some of the mechanics and the puzzles, and the atmosphere is definitely more like Doom 3. It's more horror inspired. The soundtrack is dark and moody. It's not upbeat kind of metal. Um, so yeah, I mean, part of the biggest joy of all this is seeing people rediscover it for the first time, having an absolute blast. It's such a rare treat to kind of find something. It's like if I could make the analogy, it's like what if you were a Tool fan and you didn't know that Undertow existed, and then it just it got remastered or something, and you got to explore something that you really loved from a different light, from a kind of a new perspective.
So you guys have done an excellent job with that, and also several other these really amazing ports like Turok and Turok 2. I know like my friends playing it on the Switch like at work sometimes, and I just really enjoy seeing him enjoy that because it's like that was such a big one for him, I think, because a lot of people grew up with those titles. A lot of us that didn't grow up with PCs, like that was one of the first person shooters that we could really just, yay! Like I was part of that community at least to some extent. And then the big one for me and a lot of my friends was when you guys put out Blood Fresh Supply, and that one was a little bit turbulent. Can we kind of get into that a bit, like how it released and then how you guys really quickly just made it awesome?
Well, yeah, I mean that one um, was interesting because we're all really big fans of that as well. We knew it had to be done, but we were kind of under very strict time constraints with the publisher, which was Atari. And when we released it, we knew that there was some things that we wanted to fix and we wanted to address. And I mean, that part of the development happened immediately after we pushed it out. We're like, okay, we got to like hot fix this thing, for these reasons. So we were aware of what was going to happen and the feedback and stuff we were going to get, because the community for that game especially is very, very dedicated. Let me put it that way. Um, so we were just able to kind of like brush all that aside and just focus on what we needed to do to make sure that we address those things that we kind of had not overlooked but had put on lower priority um, in for the release. So yeah, I mean, luckily we were still allotted some opportunities to fix some stuff there, but to this day I get emails like, oh, when's this going to be on Linux? When's this going to be on Xbox? When is it going to be on this? And it's like our our contract's up. Like we can't do anything with it anymore. So sorry, kind of like what's out there is kind of what you get, unfortunately.
I still really dig it. There's a lot of things that Civi was probably the most notorious one. Like someone who'd really played a shitload of Blood and knew every little nook and cranny and was going to notice every detail that was a little to the left or a little to the right or anything like that. But overall, solid, and it really put a lot of eyes on Blood again. Because like, were you guys kind of forced to reverse engineer it, from what I understand?
Yeah, there was some work that went into it that went beyond the publicly available source ports. And for what it's
Mm.
worth, I remember playing the game as a kid, and the initial version that we put out. I played it. I didn't have any problems. I loved it just the way it was. But then, like you said, Civi did his video, and it was like, oh, this gun, there's supposed to be 3 sprites instead of 2, or what, these really nitpicky, minute details that didn't affect my enjoyment of the game at all. But I feel like, when he did that video, we kind of got hogpiled. It was like suddenly everybody's like a purist and like has to have it exactly, 100% down to the, pixel, as genuine as could be. But, again, like it's a dedicated fan base and they love what they love for a reason. And hopefully we were able to address enough of those things in that, the series of patches that we put out after that.
Yeah. Did you communicate with like the folks over at like Build GDX that they were making those source ports?
No, this was just totally internal.
Right on. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I love it. I was really happy to have it, go out on sale again and put some eyes on Blood, which is fantastic. Just anything Build Engine, and right around the same time as Ion Fury as well.
Yep. Yeah, that was good timing actually, just because they Rising Waters kind of they bring up all the boats at the same time, so it's like they got really good press for the Build Engine stuff they were doing, and we got good press because we managed to find a way to port the Build Engine.
At this point, I'm going to go ahead and address the elephant in the room and say that when I first heard you guys were doing this awesome System Shock project, my initial reaction was like, oh, cool, they're just going to hire a Q Master and do Citadel like as a big thing. And then I didn't really realize the scope that it was going to become. With just the little amount that we've publicly seen at this point is already mind-blowing. But so, first of all, it's really cool that you guys let him continue to work on his project. That's awesome, because Citadel is I think it's gonna be really cool. But
that's
with you guys,
Josiah Jack, right?
Honestly, I don't know his real name. I just know him as Q Master.
Oh, okay.
He's a Quake mapping guy, and then just loves System Shock apparently.
Yeah.
But he was on the Quake cast, which is ran by my buddy Dump Truck DS, who interviewed him and was really just kind of getting into that. So from what we understood out of that interview was that, he was working on that project and he was really thankful for you guys just being cool with it and everything and letting it happen simultaneously to your project. And I hope I'm not bringing something to your attention that would cause like an issue.
No, I'm just trying to remember because it was probably a little while ago, and I want to say that it's probably the same dude. I mean, the project's called Citadel, and it's being built in Unity, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that he's had a thread on systemshock.org for years now. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. And, basically, I went to him and I said, continue doing what you're doing. You're doing an awesome job. And, we're all rooting for you. We all want to see this, come out in the end. And, as long as you don't commercialize it, like, we're cool. So that's been kind of our general rule with System Shock stuff, just in general, like, make fan missions. We actually, with the System Shock Enhanced Edition, we did released an editor with the source port, so people could actually make mods and campaigns and stuff for the game for the first time, because we all come from those backgrounds. We like to tinker with our games. We don't want to have the EULA kind of prohibit us from enjoying the game to the extent that it allows. So we're totally on the modder side. I love seeing community content. It's what keeps the game alive. It's what inspires new generations of game developers. It's how I got in initially, was using Gold Source with Half-Life, the Quake 3 editor. I mean, it would just be very short-sighted of a company, especially like ours, to shut something like that down.
I've really enjoyed hearing like all of the philosophies come out of you. Like you and Fred kind of have the same point of view there, where it's like, I would never deter someone from, doing something creative, because it is the way I see it is that you only stand to gain by him continuing to sing the praises of a System Shock, or anyone in the whole world. If they're talking about System Shock, it seems like it's good business for you guys. But
yeah, I mean, probably the best example is Valve, right? I mean, their
Yeah.
whole entire business, aside from the distribution part of it, anyways, is built on the backs of modders. I mean, Counter-Strike, Dota, Team Fortress.
Like Mesa.
Yeah, I mean, that's I was gonna say Portal, but I think that was more of an indie team. But they were all modders that more or less built games in existing engines using existing assets, and I mean those are the cornerstones of what is arguably the juggernaut in the game industry.
So then we kind of move on from there. So as I watched the project kind of get more and more information coming out about it, it seemed like there's just so many things going on right now with System Shock and in general, and it's kind of hard to manage. Like you hear one thing about one of these projects and you panic and think it's about another thing from another project. So you guys are working on, if you could clarify everything, a honest to goodness System Shock remake, and then other side is simultaneously, I don't even know if they're still working on it, but the System Shock 3 sequel, and you guys licensed that to them, said you're allowed to do that. Is that true information, or am I just spinning dirt here?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. So let's just talk about your project and what the trials and tribulations have been so far, because it seemed like it started off as one thing and then got out of scope, just got bigger than we originally thought it could be.
Yeah, I mean, where we are right now is essentially full production. So the characters, the enemies, the weapons, all that is kind of nearing completion. All the level assets are getting done and being plugged into our map that we built, in Unreal. All the mechanics are more or less fleshed out. So it's just a matter of kind of putting all the pieces together. So we're not trying to figure anything out at this point. There aren't any real questions. It's just a matter of, we've got this many people and this is how long it's going to take. Yeah. So we're at a great spot in terms of development. Every day, I'm seeing new levels get put out, new enemies getting put in, new guns getting put in. This is the fun part, right?
Yeah.
We've got, private developer builds up on Steam. We can hop in and we can get through a couple of the levels and explore, create our own kind of, bug reports, that type of thing. So I'm hoping, relatively soon. I can't obviously say anything more specific than that, but we should be hitting some kind of closed beta, and we can invite that tier of Kickstarter backers in, which will be really great. But so far, what we've done after the I forget what it was called. It was a promo that we did with Valve for the VGAs in November. It's like the indie or game expo, game arcade, something. And we created the demo that we put out to the public, which was the entire first level of the game. And it was really great to get that many people in a build that was that kind of fresh all at once, because it was really eye-opening in terms of like our performance more than anything. We're all running on stuff that's like 1080 or higher, and it runs great on our machines. But when you give a demo out to the public, you're going to get GeForce 600 series trying to run it. And so with a lot of that information and feedback we got from that, we cleaned it up, fixed a lot of those performance issues, fixed some bugs, and we released that demo out to all of our backers. So they've been enjoying it and they've been playing it, pretty much continuously since we put that out. So that's kind of been our benchmark. That level has been really well received. It's obviously missing some weapons and some enemies in some areas like cyberspace. But now we've got this bar, right? We reach that bar with the rest of the levels and, we're going to be good.
it's just it's good to hear it all from the horse's mouth, because we've been in that. Like a few weeks ago, I'm just sitting around talking about like, yeah, this is really cool. Can't wait for the System Shock thing to come out. And then someone's like, oh, didn't you hear? It's like they shut down production and the whole team's out, and they're talking about a different project that has nothing to do with this one. And it's just that in that case, it seems like it might even be bad press, and that's the opposite of the point I was trying to make earlier. So, what's been your experience with just handling that in general? I know you're dealing with it as we speak right now with me. So
yeah, it's been really frustrating. I mean, I'm just going to be totally honest. It's unfortunate what's going on, but I honestly don't know any more than anyone else about what's going on with that project. It's just, the confusion that it's causing has just been a real pain in my ass. Because I get people saying and leaving messages and writing emails calling me a crook and a thief and a swindler, and like, oh, the project's dead and it's never going to come out, like you're going to get sued. And I'm like, but that's not our game. Like, we're still in full production. We do a Kickstarter update every month. We're like on our 68th update or something like that. Like, the game's been in production for a long time, or development. And eventually we're going to get by that, right? When we launch the thing, we're going to say, our game's done. We've done our part. Everybody's gotten their rewards. We're good. And, hopefully we can create that, the perception of distance, so that, our game can be judged on its own merits and not, anything else. At least I hope that's how it goes down, because, like I said, I get, even in our Kickstarter updates, like, there's a very vocal minority of people that like have backed the game. And our last update was like, here's like animation cycles for the Gorilla Tiger and the exec bot. And here's this awesome screenshot of, these weapons and all, it's this jam-packed update. We work really hard on those. And like the first comment that comes out is some, guy, and he's like, oh, great, another update with, just more of the same. And it's like, well, what do you expect? Like, what do you want in an update? Like, what else could we possibly deliver, outside of, here's the launch date, here's your key, go play it, like, just at least be happy that we're still working on this and that you're going to get the game that you were promised. So
it seems like it's going to be more than the game we were promised, to be fair. Like, this is from first day, like there's going to be this project to what we're seeing and hearing about now. It's just, this is going to be mind blowing. Like, I'm super stoked for it when it does come out.
It's definitely, yes. I mean, the difference between what we're doing now and the demo is pretty dramatic, but we were very, very careful to keep that style and kind of the original vision that we had pitched and that we had, created that demo around, because that's what people backed. That's what they paid for. But just in terms of like the smoothness of the performance and the lighting quality, the artistry that's going into all the assets. I mean, it's miles above that. And I'm personally very, very proud of what we're doing.
So with that, there's like a fairly large amount of money. This seems like, would it be wrong to say like the largest project that you guys have ever really taken on as a company? And it just seems like this is going to be like a big milestone. Like, are you guys like really heavily invested? Is it scary? Is it anything but just, it can't be all pure pleasure with something this big with this amount of stakes. So I'm just wondering, like, what are your feelings going forward? Are you like totally confident that it's going to be like what System Shock fans want and what those investors paid for?
I am now. Yes.
Okay.
But there have been times, over the past couple of years during development where I've gone from, the day that we launched the Kickstarter in like 2 days, we had met our goal. That was both exciting and terrifying. And then, fast forward like a year and, I haven't been able to sleep in like, a week because of the state of things. And then there's, there are those moments of dread, like when I realized that what we were doing was, wasn't going to cut it. And there was no way that we were going to be able to deliver promise. And essentially I had to, bring a different group of people on that could deliver what it was that I had wanted. And as a result of that, there was, again, like kind of miscommunication. Like I announced that the game was going on hiatus, which does not equal the same thing as canceled. It just means we're taking a break. We're reevaluating our situation. We were going to make some big dramatic changes that were going to better align to the vision of the Kickstarter. Anything that happened after that was going to be positive. And a lot of people didn't read into that or didn't come to that conclusion, despite, me saying almost the same thing verbatim, in our update. And I got death threats. I had people contacting the BBB. I had people contacting both the Washington State and the Oregon State, bureaus of whatever. Like I had officials from the states that like were saying, oh, we got these claims from people that, you're ripping them off and all this. And all that did was just waste my time because we did have to go. We had to sit down and we had just basically tell them what was going on. And the moment we did that, they were like, oh well, this doesn't qualify for what you're being accused of. I was like, thank you. That's a relief. I'm not going to get charged by the state or be investigated for fraud, or what I mean. Like that shit's just crazy. But there were some people that were genuinely very, very, very upset for no reason other than they just didn't either read the full statement or they just misunderstood it. And again, like all it did was just sidetrack us. It just slowed us down. So we got through that. We showed our first couple of updates past that. And then it was like, oh, okay, cool. This is what we wanted. Sorry about that. So that's kind of the nature of the way that we developed this game, or just the route that we took by using a crowdfunding platform, was that everybody that donated, and let's not mince words, what they gave us was a donation. Everybody that donated that treated it as, or a lot of them treated it as like an actual pre-order or as an investment, which is not how you should go into a crowdfunding campaign. You should be totally ready to lose that money because of the nature of that platform. I'm not saying that that's what is going to happen or what was going to happen with us. That was never an option. But there's to this day, there's a big misconception about what crowdfunding is. And that particular instance did not help us, when we had decided to kind of go back to the drawing board with Sytem Shock.
Well, I'm just glad we could just set the record straight. Sytem Shock still coming out, looking awesome and everything. That's awesome. So let's put that mumbo jumbo behind us and just get into what are the really cool, fun things that you guys are doing with the game? Like reimagining the puzzles and like the cyberspace parts of it and everything. There's a lot to, the original and even, your guys' re-release of those games, that imagining it now, it's got to be a lot of creative energy and a lot of really cool things going on. So what's that experience been for you?
Yeah, just the tools that we have available to us now to kind of see that creative vision through is just a really big part of it. You mentioned cyberspace. Like the original is kind of notorious because it's hard to control. It's very confusing from a perspective standpoint, like where you're supposed to go. All the walls are transparent, so it's like it's hard to visualize where you are and what you're doing. And what we've kind of prototyped so far is very different, but still, kind of in the same vein of you being inside the computer, like you've jacked into it, and you're seeing the inner circuitry and the inner workings of the computer from a piece of data's perspective, essentially. So getting to kind of completely redesign that, and the experience has been really fun. The way that it's kind of playing now, it's almost like a 6 Degree of Freedom shooter, almost like Descent, that you get to play inside that mini game, which is a really fun kind of break you get to take from the first person perspective part of the game, the shooting part. You find the cyber terminals, you hack in, or you interact with them, I should say, and suddenly it's like you're playing almost an entirely different game, but with like the same control scheme.
It's like maybe BioShock influence there. Like, I really like the idea of just mini games being a part, and that's something that kind of began with Sytem Shock too. But really getting to like have those little breaks and like do something outside of just running and gunning and shooting and everything. Like that's what people kind of gravitate towards these games for, I think, is just generally setting a complete atmosphere and really feeling like you're in a different universe and not just we could play Doom if we just want to like rush into a room and not have to make any real decisions other than how do I kill this monster?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's like cyberspace is really cool. Some of the enemy types that we've reimagined are really fun. One of the did was we looked at all the weapons that were in the original, and there's a lot. I'm like just pulling a number out here. I think there's like over 20 weapons. And we're like, okay, that's too many. And a lot of them served kind of very similar purposes, so they were kind of redundant. And what we decided to do was kind of combine some of those weapons so that you didn't lose that functionality completely. In some cases, yes, but we've kind of pared the number of weapons down to something that was manageable, and that would kind of jive a little bit better with the grid-based inventory system. So that's really cool. I'm excited to see people kind of pick and choose favorite weapons, because I don't think there's going to be like one that's, that people are primarily going to just pick up and then kind of stick with. But yeah, I mean, just like the whole process of reimagining just about every aspect of the game has been both challenging and rewarding, seeing it in engine. Yeah, it's been a rush. It's been a huge project. We've been working on this particular, let's just call it like this branch of development for the last couple of years, and it's shaping up to be something special.
So from a storytelling standpoint, we're looking at pretty much the same type of storytelling, or are there going to be cut scenes with voice acting and all that?
It's going to be almost identical to the original. Yeah, there's not going to be any cutscenes except for the intro and the final cutscene of the game. And we decided to do that just because we didn't want to break up the narrative. We didn't want to break up the game. We wanted the player to feel like they were in control, close to 100% of the time. There are some like little, I call them like flavor animations that are not skippable, but they're also not longer than like 3 or 4 seconds long. And they only occur like the first time you interact with something. So like in our demo, when you go into the little room that's kind of got your stash of supplies, you pick up the pipe and the camera takes over and your character picks it up, kind of tosses it in the air, and then hammers the end of it into his palm, and you kind of get a sense of weight of the weapon, and then you kind of like build a little character for the hacker by doing that. Just like these hints. We didn't want to do anything that was too expressive, because the whole idea of this game is that you are this character. You're supposed to be immersed to a point where, and I guess the lack of a better term, like you believe that you're that person. And that's kind of the whole idea of Sytem Shock. It's what kind of put it on the map and more or less started the whole idea of the immersive sim. So that was kind of like our golden rule, like never take control out of the player's hands, nix kind of scripted cutscenes, that type of stuff. Like just let the player play.
Yeah. Well, I really can't wait to give you money for it, man.
I appreciate
Looking
it.
forward to it.
I appreciate the support.
Yeah. Well, I'm a fan, dude. That's what this is. So before we get out of here, you mentioned earlier that you have several titles on the block that you can't quite announce yet, but are there any projects out there that you really want to do, like a dream game for you that you haven't gotten a chance to put your hands on yet?
Yeah, I mean, this is my favorite question. It's got to be No One Lives Forever. That's kind of like the de facto, I have one day I'm going to get it. Like nothing's going to stop me. I've been working on it for so long, but I feel like if we were able to get Blade Runner, we should be able to get No One Lives Forever.
Oh man. So he's going to be mad at me for bringing it up, but Creamy Elephant, specifically asked to bring that up. He via some friends in the community, I was like, hey, anybody got questions before I talk to Steven? And that was one of the specific, when are we getting No One Lives Forever?
When are we getting No One Lives Forever? Yeah. I mean, I can't say anything just because there's nothing to talk about right now, but I've got my feelers out. I've got people doing some work here and there, trying to figure some stuff out, and it's a slow burn, and it's going to be for some time. But every time we do a game like Doom 64, our reputation goes up a little bit, and we get noticed by bigger and bigger companies, and doors open, and new opportunities come, and one of these days it's going to be No One Lives Forever. So stay tuned, I guess.
Well, that's all I've got for you, man. I really, really appreciate you doing this and the time that you've given me and everything, and being patient with me. I know I kind of sound crazy because I just woke up, but I'm doing my best, drinking my coffee. So, well,
I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk to you. And I mean, I wouldn't be here if we all didn't love these classic games.
Yeah,
I'm just overwhelmingly just happy that people love this stuff as much as we do, because this is all we want to do, and we've been given the opportunity to take some of these games that people love so much and kind of put a new coat of paint on them and make them playable for not only them but for new people to enjoy. And there's really no greater joy for me.
Well, may the outer gods and the elder gods bless you for doing it, man, because it's the best, and we love you.
Thanks, man.
So y'all know that we've got to do some plugs and some thank yous before we get out of here. I just want to go ahead and quickly get through this. So quakefans.net, check them out. Tell Smango Motherload sent you. Go check out rocketjump.zone, competition for all things arena shooters, specifically really cool stuff going on with Diabolical right now. Go check out the multiplayer Doom Federation, and check out the radio show sponsored by In the Keep called Doom is Dead Podcast. Their most recent episode with Rot King is absolutely mind-blowing. If you're into mapping or Doom or anything at all remotely to do with this topic, I highly recommend that one. And you should go check out the US Quake community if you want any sort of weekly events going on. Classic Quake, classic Doom. If you need more podcasts to subscribe to, I also recommend you check out Quake Fans Radio. That's quakefans.net again. And also go check out the QuakeCast, one of my favorite podcasts in the world, hosted by Dump Truck DS and RC and sometimes JCR. It's incredible. But until next time, stay in the keep.